Beis of Shoftim, and Perek Aleph described a situation where much of Eretz Yisrael was not conquered, and Canaanites were in there with Avodah Zorah and all of the Averos that they were doing. Vayal Malach Hashem min Gilgal el Habochim, and an angel of God. So actually, the Meforshim tell us that Malach does not mean an angel, but it means a shaliach of Hashem, a very unusual term for a Navi. A Navi is normally not called a Malach Hashem, but here it means a Navi. And according to Seder Olam, Rashi brings that the Navi is Pinchas, and he goes from Gilgal, which was the main camp of the Jewish people, that's where they crossed the Yarden, to Bochim, to a city called Bochim, and we'll see later why it's called Bochim, which means crying. And he's giving Klal Yisrael Musar. You haven't done your job. Vayomer, speaking in the name of Hashem, Aleh eschem mi Mitzrayim, I took you out of Mitzrayim. Avi eschem el haaretz asher nishbati l'aveiseichem, I brought you to the land that I swore that I would give to your forefathers, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. V'yomar, and I had said, Lo afir brisi itchem liolam, the covenant and the promise that I made to you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I will never abrogate. My promise to have you as my nation is forever. But I have a request of you. V'yatem, but you, Hashem says this in the Torah, Lo sichresu bris liyoshvei haaretz hazos, do not make a peace covenant or treaty with these people who live, the Canaanite people. Now again, according to Rashi, this is kipshuto. No bris. You have to wipe them out. According to the Rambam, it's a little less definitive. You are allowed to have a bris if they renounce Avodah Zarah, accept the Zion mitzvahs, pay mas, and assume the status of Avadim. But to simply have a bris where they continue Avodah Zarah is absolutely usher. Mizbechosehem titzaitz, and you must smash and destroy the altars of Avodah Zarah. That's what I told you to do. V'lo shamatem b'kaili, but you're not listening. Ma zayis asisem, what is it that you're doing? So because of this, there is a punishment. V'gam amarti lo agaresh osam mipnechem. Because you are willing, so it's an interesting thing. Because we were willing to let the Canaanites stay in the land, Hashem will take away our power to even conquer them. So it's interesting. It started off with our not doing our job. But because we didn't do our job, Hashem takes away the ability to do the job even when we want to do it. That we will not be able to defeat some of the Canaanite nations, and they will dominate us and rule over us. I said that if you don't expel them, you will be powerless to fight them later. V'hayu lachem litzidim, they will be like thorns. They will be sticking you. They will plunder you. They will harass you. They will dominate you. Ve'elayehem, and all of their false gods will be a stumbling block against you, that you will be enticed to worship those foreign gods. And therefore, Pinchas is giving them musar. Unless you do tshuva, you're not just going to have a situation where the Canaanites will pay you taxes and you'll live fine and you'll do your thing, they'll do their thing. They will dominate you. They will stick you. They will oppress you. They will rule over you. And you will be nichshal in their Avodah Zarah. And the pasuk says, Vayehi kidaber malach Hashem es hadvarim ha'ela, when the angel of God, this is Pinchas, completed these words to Bnei Yisrael, Vayisu ha'am es kolam vayibku. Everyone cried because they wanted to do tshuva. And that is why the place is called Bochim, because it was the place of crying. Vayikru shema makamahu bochim. The name was called Bochim. Vayizbechu sham l'Hashem. And they brought a korban to Hashem. Again, at that point, the Mishkan is in Gilgal. It is not yet in Shiloh. Well, a little bit of a question. It depends on when this happened. But if the Mishkan is already in Shiloh, actually in the book of Yoshua, it seems to have been in Shiloh already, which is the Chelek of Ephraim. So l'chayra bamais are prohibited. You're not allowed to bring korbanos outside of the Mishkan once you have the Mishkan of Shiloh. But this would be considered a Hiras Shah, a temporary dispensation. If this occurred before the Mishkan was in Shiloh, and the Mishkan was only in Gilgal, at that point, bamos are permitted. So whether this is a general permission or whether this is a Haras Shah would depend on whether the Mishkan in Shiloh is already here. Now, as I mentioned before, Sefer Shoftim in the beginning toggles. It moves back and forth between Yoshua's time and the time of the judges. And here it once again goes backwards and gives us a little bit of a flashback to the end of Yoshua's life. And it starts off repeating a pasuk in the book of Yoshua. Vayishalach Yoshua es ha'am. After Yoshua divided up the land, he sent everybody home. Of course, a lot of people weren't able to go to their land because it wasn't conquered yet. But Vayechu b'nei Yisrael ish nachalaso. Everybody who had an inheritance went to their inheritance. L'reshet es ha'aretz, to inherit and to settle Eretz Yisrael. And Shmuel now gives us a little bit of historic perspective. Vayavdu ha'am es Hashem kol yemei Yehoshua. During the lifetime of Yehoshua, Am Yisrael was faithful to Hashem. And indeed, kol yemei haskenim asher herichu yamim achar Yehoshua. After Yoshua, until the appointment of the first Shofet Asniel ben Kenaz, there was a period of Zakenim, kind of a collector, like Pirkei Avos says, Moshe Kibel Torah Misene, Masar Yoshua, Yoshua L'Zkenim. There were elders, there were sages that were Mayrich Yamim after Yoshua. And Klal Yisrael were still serving Hashem properly. And that is because Asher Ra'u Es Kol Maisa Hashem Agadol, Asher Asa Yisrael. Because this was a generation that still remembered everything, all the miracles that God had done for Am Yisrael. Now, this does not refer to the miracles of Yetziat Mitzrayim, because the generation of the Exodus had largely died out. But there were still people after Yeshua's death that remembered the miracles of the desert, whether it was the man, the Be'er, the Ananei HaKavod, the various wars. They remembered Moshe Rabbeinu. And they certainly remembered the miracles of Yoshua ben Nun, the splitting of the Yarden, and the falling of the walls of Yericho, and the defeat of the 31 Malachim. And the memories of those miracles were still fresh. They were fresh during the whole life of Yoshua, and even after Yoshua died. And the pasuk says, again, we know this from the book of Yoshua as well, Vayamas Yoshua ben Nun Eved Hashem ben Me'ah v'Yesher Shanim. Yoshua, who's also called the servant of Hashem, as the Radak says about Moshe, by an Eved, Mashekana Eved Kana Rabbi. Whatever an Eved owns belongs to his master. The appellation of Eved Hashem is the beautiful Madrega, where every single talent and facility you have, you give and devote to the service of the Ribbon Shalom. And Yoshua died at the age of 110. Vayikbaru oso bigvul nachalato, and they buried him in his portion in the Chelek of Shevet Ephraim, in the town that's called Timnas Scheres, Bahar Ephraim, in the mountain of Ephraim, Mitzvon Lahar Goash, north of Mount Goash. Again, Chazal have a drasha. Cheres is also a term for sun, and Timnas is a lashon of Temunah, and it says on Yehoshua's grave, Matseva, there was the picture of a sun as a reminder of the miracle that he stopped the sun in fighting. North of Har Goash, there is no mountain called Har Goash, but Goash is like an earthquake, and it mentions that because Yehoshua was not eulogized properly, there was an earthquake in which the land was quaking. If you're Misatzel Behespedo Shel Chacham, you're actually Chayav Misa. And then eventually what happened was, Gam Kol Adorahu Nesfu Alav, eventually the old generation died. The generation that remembered the miracles of Yeshua. Vayakam Dor Achar Achareim Asher Lo Yadu Es Hashem. They did not know the miracles of God. V'gam Kol Esamasa Asher Asa Yisrael. And what happened was exactly as Pinchas predicted. Because of the Canaanite influence, especially if you're living with Canaanim who are Avodah Avodah Zarah, Vayasu b'nei Yisrael esara b'einei Hashem. They did evil in the eyes of God. Vayavdu es haba'olim. And they worshipped the Avodah Zarah that is known as Baal. Vayazvu es Hashem Elokei Avaisam. And they abandoned, they forsook Hashem, the God of their forefathers. Hamaitzi Yisa mi'eretz Mitzrayim, who took them out of Mitzrayim. Vayelchu acharei Elohim acherim. And they went after foreign gods, really non-existent gods. Me'elohei ha'amim asher seviv Isayim. From the nations that surrounded them, vayishtachavu lahem. And they bowed down to those gods. Vayachisu es Hashem. And as Pinchas warned them, and as the Torah warns us over and over again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was angry. We needed to be punished. Vayazvu es Hashem, and they had abandoned the Almighty. V'yavdu labal v'lashtaros. Right? Ashtaros is Ishtar. So Baal and Ishtar were two Canaanite gods, male and female. Vayichar af Hashem b'Yisrael. And the anger of God was kindled against Am Yisrael. Vayitneim biyad shosim. And he delivered them into the hands of plunderers, meaning the Umot HaOlam that were being tolerated, wound up conquering Shtachim, Eretz Yisrael. V'yashusu osam. And they plundered and harassed the Jewish people. V'yimkareim biyad oyeveim misavev, and Hashem, this is Shmuel HaNavi writing about this. V'yimkareim, and Hashem delivered them biyad oyeveim misavev, into the hands of their enemies. V'lo yachlu oid lamed lifnei oyeveim, and they no longer had the strength to stand before their enemies. B'chol asher yatzu, no matter what they tried to do, even when they tried to conquer the enemy or just to defend their own territories, whatever they tried to do, Yad Hashem haisa bam lera'ah, the hand of God was against them. If Hashem is against you, you're not going to succeed. Lera'ah, in a bad way. Now this was not done without warning. Kasher diber Hashem, as Hashem says in the Torah. V'kasher nishba Hashem, and God even swore. Vayetzer lahem ma'ot. And God gave them many, many tzaras, much adversity. But what happened in this cycle was, when things got very bad, and the Jewish people did tshuva, right? This Shmuel is describing the process generally. Vayakem Hashem Shoftim. Hashem gave them a shofet, gave them a leader. V'yoshium, who was able to save them. Miyad shoseim. right? So things get bad. The shofet saves us. For a while we're good. Then we start sinking. And the same thing happens again. This cycle. Up, down, up, down, up, down. And that's what it says. The shofet saved us. Hashem sent the shofet. But then what happens is, Gam el shofteim lo shomeu. Eventually we don't listen to the shofet. Ki zanu acharei Elohim acher. We turn after those other gods. V'yishtachvu them. We bow down to them. Saru v'ahem min haderech asher halchu avaisam. We turn quickly away from the derech that our righteous forefathers followed. Lishmaya mitzvos Hashem. Saru v'ahem min haderech are the exact words that the Torah describes the chet ha'egel. V'chi heikim Hashem lahem shoftim, and then God will give them shoftim when things get very bad. V'haya Hashem im hashofet, and God will be with the shofet. V'hoshia miyad oivim, and God will save them from their enemies. Kol yemei hashofet. Ki yinachem Hashem minakasam, because God, so to speak, has remorse. This is an expression. Over their suffering, minakasam, because of their prayers and their shoutings and their screams, mibnei lochatzayim, because of their oppressors. So Hashem listens to our tefillah, listens to our tshuva, gives us a Yeshua. But instead of hakaras hatov, we rebel against Hashem. In other words, what Shmuel is doing is, before we get into the specifics of each shofet, which is the remainder of the book, Shmuel is giving us an outline of the process that is going to be described. Oppression, tshuva, shofet, salvation, and then we fall back into averos, oppression, tshuva, shofet, salvation. That pattern is going to repeat itself over and over again. So Shmuel is giving us it in general description, and then we'll get into the details of every story. When the shofet dies, Yeshuva v'shchisa mi'avosam. The Jewish people become worse than their forefathers. To go after other gods, liyavdam, to worship them, l'shtachavos, to bow down to them. They did not drop a single one of their bad deeds and their bad thoughts. And God will be furious against us. And God will say, if this nation, he doesn't even call them my people, this nation, this guy, violates my covenant that I commanded their forefathers, and they don't listen to my voice, they don't listen to my mitzvos, I will not help them to dispossess or conquer the nations here. In other words, what Yoshua was not able to do when he died, I will not help them. Laman nasos bam es Yisrael hashomrim heim es derech Hashem lolechas bam kasher shomru avaisam imlo. So this pasuk, which is pasuk chaf beis, perek beis, pasuk chaf beis, is a difficult pasuk actually, because it seems to be bringing in a totally new idea that we haven't had before. Until this point, the whole thesis of the perek is that because of our averos, because of our avodah zarah, because we have forsaken the way of Hashem, Hashem will not give us the koach to conquer the nations of Canaan. And not only will we not have the koach to conquer them, but they will conquer us and dominate us and oppress us, because we are no longer worthy of divine protection unless we do tshuva. That is the idea that is presented until this point. But now, in Pasuk Chaf Beis, another idea is introduced, that the reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu left the Canaanite presence in the land is to give us a test, to test how faithful we can be. Meaning, will we believe in Hashem even when there is a Canaanite influence? Meaning, if there's no Canaanite influence, then it's easy to believe in Hashem. There's no counter nisayon. This was a nisayon that Hashem said, I'm going to leave some Canaanim here that you will not be able to get rid of, who will have an influence over you. And we will see whether you will be omed b'nisayon. This is a big chiddush. This is very different. This is not simply saying Hashem is leaving the Canaanim as a punishment to us because we're not worthy, but rather Hashem is saying, I am giving you a nisayon to see if you can be faithful to me, even with the Canaanite presence. And that is why Vayanach Hashem es hagayim ha'elu v'li harisha maher. God left them and did not dispossess them quickly. V'lo nesanam biyad Yoshua. He did not deliver them in the hands of Yoshua, because Hashem wanted there to be a nisayon. This is a very big chiddush, and this is not an idea that's really repeated or elaborated upon, but it's kind of thrown out as a machshava, that perhaps there was a hashgacha pratis in Hashem creating a difficult situation so that we would be omed b'nisayon. L'maisa, most of the time we were not omed b'nisayon, but at least the possibility was there that we might have been able to do so. So ad kan, Perek Beis.